So yesterday, it was quite an interesting day. For some of us, we were so glued to our devices, just trying to catch that glimpse of the live court session. But amid all this, you'll be shocked to know what some of our fellow South African brothers and sisters were saying about the situation regarding our former president's body and just the whole thing going to court and whatnot. I'm not saying this as somebody who is maybe upset or angry, no. I'm just simply saying that I think as Africans we can do better. Because I mean, look at this. I came across this report which says something like, we don't want the LUNGU'S descendants to claim land. A civic movement, Progressive Forces of South Africa, is picketing outside the High Court in Pretoria ahead of the case between the Zambian government and the family of the late former president, Edgar Lungu. Like, I don't know, you can even, some of these things, you can actually like laugh as if it's funny. But I'm just imagining a situation where there's a court hearing about the body of the former president, and then there's a situation like this happening. They're saying the matter concerns the repatriation of Lungu's remains to Zambia. Then it goes on further to say, the movement's president, the same one, Mteto, something like that, says, as Black South Africans, we are still fighting the displacement. Anyway, let me read the whole thing. So the post went as follows. We don't want the LUNGU'S descendants to claim land, PFSA. This was on the 30th of April, 2026, which is yesterday. It was yesterday, yeah? A civic movement, Progressive Forces of South Africa, PFSA, is picketing outside the High Court in Pretoria ahead of the case between the Zambian government and the family of the late former president Edgar Lungu. The matter concerns the repatriation of Lungu's remains to Zambia. I'll skip to what the president of this group actually said. So he said, as Black South Africans, we are still fighting the displacement during colonization and apartheid, and graves play a very significant role in the process of claiming the land, and we don't want the Lungu descendants to claim land in the future used by their grandfather. Then he goes further to say, the Zambian community and government want to repatriate their president and give him a befitting burial, so we are in support of that. So they are simply saying they are in support of the idea of the former president being buried outside, not in their land. But anyway, we'll leave it at that. So back to today's subject, which regards the hearing that was taking place yesterday in court. Let's get into this video and then I'll say what I have to say on the other side.
A full view on SABC News. The Zambian government and the Lungu family have returned to the Gauteng Provincial Division of the High Court in Pretoria over the remains of former President Edgar Lungu. The dispute, which has been ongoing for months, is now over, well, at least this part of it, with agreement about where and how the former leader will be buried. The government wants Lungu to be laid to rest in Zambia with a full state funeral, while his family says he wished to be buried in a private burial ceremony without state involvement. For more on this and everything that transpired in court, we're joined now by SABC News international reporter, Kylie Sekumana. Good evening. And I found myself having to almost pause there and correct myself. Are we at a point where this dispute has finally and decisively been resolved, or is it an aspect of it that has been resolved?
Well, certainly, Tula Caesar, it's the aspect because, for example, today there was a mutual agreement between the parties around the whole issue that that 22nd April order should be set aside, and it's been reconsidered actually. But also in the main, in terms of the location of the remains of former President Lungu, so there's a site that has been chosen in Pretoria East, in Pretoria, obviously, and obviously in terms of really access of the mortal remains. So the family will still have those rights and responsibilities, but also in the main, in this regard, to Lesizo here, we got an opportunity as well to speak to the family, how they were really just speaking about the agonizing experience. I mean, we know that Mr. Lungu passed away on the 5th of June, and you look at this particular issue, it's still pending with the Supreme Court of Appeal. And in fact, the family say on the 19th of June, that's when they will have an opportunity to file their papers before the SCA. And in fact, we can take a listen to Mr. Zulu, to his response in this regard.
It is not about convenience. It is about giving the former president a dignified burial. The family is fighting this matter at very great expense, all for the sake of giving the former president a dignified burial. And that dignified burial should not be defined by the government. The family, the next of kin, should be allowed to engage, or indeed to determine what would amount to a dignified burial without any imposition or any rights that they have been taken away from them. The High Court judgment took away all the rights that are culturally and traditionally known to be owned by the family, and repose those rights in the government to the exclusion of the family. And that should not be the case.
So with a story like this, Kaya, that has been dragging, we are now on, 10 months since he passed on. And as we say, on the 5th of June, it will be a full year since the late former Zambian president, Edgar Lungu, passed on. It's quite easy with a story like this for things to get convoluted and muddled up a bit. So you've talked to the court order of the 22nd of April that had been obtained by the family, but the Zambian government had a problem with it, or was it the other way around?
Well, certainly it was the other way around, because we saw how obviously the family obtained the order.
Yes.
Purely because now there was an understanding that the SCA's appeal had lapsed.
Yes.
And also now the whole issue around it is that the Zambian government is saying that this is a former head of state, so he deserves to be accorded a state funeral. And also they do go as far as saying that there were some allegations that Mr. Lungu was poisoned. Obviously it hasn't been proven, and hence the post-mortem that was conducted on his body. So we're still waiting for the outcome. But the family appears to be totally opposed to that particular issue, because they say, in as far as they are concerned, the whole remains of Mr. Lungu, they should have the right to make sure that they are well preserved and well kept.
And therein lies the other detail, Kaya, and I'm glad we've been building up to it quite steadily, because we don't want to leave anyone behind. As much as the main question of where and by whom he should be buried remains pending and is subject to the appeal, the one aspect, other than the judgment being reconsidered, the other aspect has to do with the holding pattern. What do we do in the interim? Talk to me about that aspect, about where the mortal remains will be kept coming out of that mutual agreement, and what arrangements are made if anyone wants to have access to the mortal remains in the interim.
Well, certainly, it's a very complex case, because you go back to that judgment by Judge Ledwaba, where he essentially said the state actually can repatriate the body. I mean, this is a former head of state, this is a former commander-in-chief of the Zambian Armed Forces, but the family then decided and said, look, this should not be the case. We're going to appeal this particular matter. But then there has been a bit of a lapse. But obviously the family is not really saying in full terms. But when you do go through the court papers, SCA does indicate that the time that was allocated to the family, they're not able to meet that particular deadline. So now in this particular instance, for example, I think the judge today was very clear in saying that, look, this particular issue, give the SCA a chance to really just go through it, as opposed to having all these cases pending the SCA's appeal.
Yeah, all right. Thank you for that, Kaya. So it appears that the overall stance is that we are in a holding pattern pending the SCA hearing an appeal by the family.
Well, very much so, Tilasiza. And obviously, it's been quite a very lengthy process, quite protracted for the two parties. I mean, for example, when we spoke to South Africa's International Relations and Cooperation Minister, we know that last year he was President Ramaphosa's envoy to engage with President Hichilema. He said, look, the legal processes are very, very lengthy and they can really take years. So negotiations, the dialogue, the parties should be really amenable in terms of letting the dialogue kick in this regard.
We live in hope, Kaya. 10 months down the line, we live in hope that perhaps at some point they may be able to find one another through the processes of dialogue. Kaya Khumalo is senior international reporter here at SABC News and has been following that legal battle between.
So that was a breakdown of what really happened yesterday during the court hearing and the South African High Court in Pretoria. So like you heard from the video, there were some mutual agreements that were made, for which I think that's a good sign. The fact that there is some form of agreement, even if, a situation where people disagree, but at least there has to be some things that two people can agree on, like they've agreed on the place where the remains of the former president will be kept at the moment. And then we can see from the video as well that despite what's going on and all the mix-up and everything, the family still has the right to be responsible and everything of the body. It's not like they've been completely sidelined out of the whole thing, like they can't do anything or say anything about it. Yeah, so, but then there are some things that actually drew my attention, in that video as I watched it. There's a situation regarding how every government would like their situation in terms of current affairs to be taken care of how they want things to go. But then there's also always the issue around the citizens or how some people might think things need to be handled. I'll give you an example of the statement that was made by Makebi Zulu in the video. So he said something like, he actually claimed to say that the High Court judgments took away all the rights that are culturally and traditionally known to be owned by the family. In this case, he's talking about ECL's family, and impose them on the government to the exclusion of the family. So he's saying something like, the way he actually describes it, it's as if the family has been totally stripped off of any right to the body, for which I don't think that's the situation or that's the case, because just because a government wants a role to play in the burial or the state funeral of the former president, it shouldn't feel, or it should not mean like the family has just they've been done away with. So like we saw from that video, I'm sure you can go back and watch it again. You'll be able to tell that the judge actually did say that the state can do that because of the person in question. But it was the family that decided to appeal. The family was not okay with that. That means if this state funeral is being delayed, I really wouldn't say it's the government that's delaying it. Because had the government been allowed in the first place, that state funeral would have already taken place. So it's a situation where the family is not comfortable with the idea of the state funeral. I don't mean to say much, but Mr. Makebi Zulu is family spokesperson. But I'm just hoping that everything that he says represents the family. I just hope that everything he says is not in his interest. I'm saying this because how do you expect honest views or honest opinions from someone who is also aspiring to be a president, and at the same time, he's the family spokesperson. I think there's some sort of like a question mark. Like, Zambians deserve to know, like, this person, is he really somebody just working in the best interest of the family, or he's doing it in the best interest of himself and whatever aspirations that he has? So when he says some things like that, some people who are just following from afar, they'll obviously have these divided thoughts and opinions about what's really happening. But anyway, I did not mean to go as far as this. I just thought we'll have a brief background or analysis regarding what happened yesterday. So as it stands, the whole issue has not been resolved. It's just an aspect of the issue that has been resolved. I think I heard something to do with the family is still going to file some papers. That means this case is still going on. Because at the end of the day, we just want to see this matter resolved, and we will all be happy as a nation. So thank you so much for having taken time to watch this video. Let me know what you think about today's video and the court hearing that took place yesterday. What are your views? What are your thoughts? Feel free to comment, like, share. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.